Hello and welcome to Dance For's A Conversation Place number 17, and we're joined today by Heni Hale, a performance maker from the Dog Kennel Hill project, and musicologist Christine Gengaro, an author of Listening to Stanley Kubrick. So before I hand over to them, it's great that we're here. It's great we're in this space. And I'm going to quickly hand over to them now to start talking about the thing that brings them in this space, and that is Stanley Kubrick. So here we go.
Hey, Heni, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? I'm good. Pleased to be here and meeting you.
Doing well. So you're a performance maker. Do you yourself perform?
Yes, I do. I do perform, and but the particular piece that we're centering this conversation in is one that I don't perform in. So I'm often in a sort of director bit, but I often do that with another director, so that I co-direct. There's two of us, another woman called Rachel Lopez Luneta. And for this particular piece, Shelley On A Loop, it's the one that relates to Kubrick. We're both outside directors. But I also perform, and I'm fascinated in performance is a big aspect of what I'm interested in.
Can you tell me about this piece?
Right. So I'll tell you. So let's start by the piece itself. The piece itself is it's an installation piece. It's kind of, I would call it durational in that we've always presented it so far on a loop, which is why it's called Shelley On A Loop.
Right.
It's a sort of 25-minute event that just keeps then repeating and repeating, and that could go on for 3 hours, or the most we've done is 3 hours at the moment, but you know, we could look into different kind of durations for how long it loops. It's an installation in that it's generally it's in a situation where audiences can kind of come and go, although they tend to like to start at the beginning and stay to the end. But in certain gallery situations, people stay for 10 minutes sometimes and leave, and sometimes they stay for several loops and leave. So it has that sort of feel about it. But it's a live installation in that it has 4 performers in it. Mm-hmm. And it's a sort of, I would say, deconstructed and very played around with and very stripped bare reenactment or attempt at reenactment of the very famous scene. Well, I think it's a sort of infamous, famous scene in The Shining, where Shelley Duval waves the baseball back at Jack Nicholson, and it's the bit before where I think the lines are, "How do you like it?" and it's where she's just discovered that his book that he's been writing is actually just pages and pages of the lines, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. So we sort of start from there, and I'll shut up in a minute because I think I want you to talk. But the piece is more in one of the things we did with it was that we wanted to sort of deconstruct and study the actions, the rhythm, and the sort of camera angles of the film, and then retranspose those into a sort of live space. In this sort of quite imaginative way. So it's not necessarily that you would see that, because we're not taking any of the actual visuals. We have a chair in there, but we've taken only elements. But the way that the chair moves is in relation to the camera move.
Right, like how you would see it if you were watching the film.
Hmm?
Like how you would see it if you were watching.
Yeah. So it's all about sort of the screen view, and so we create movement in relation to what's moving in the frame, which is obviously because the camera's moving. So and the bodies are obviously moving. Jack and Shelley obviously move. So there's this sort of strange, very sort of, I mean, I'm not sure that, it's how we engage in the process. I'm not sure how precise, like if you were really studying it, you'd go, well, that's wrong, and that's wrong. We've had a lot of license in making it work also as a choreographic piece, but we've sort of done that. But it came from an overarching research of ours that's been going on for a few years and manifested in all sorts of different pieces, which is what we call etudes in tension and crisis. So we're very interested in this notion, quite obviously a very big notion of tension and crisis, and we looked quite a lot into films, and of course Kubrick came up, and then The Shining came up as a major example of tension and crisis.
Yeah.
And so the enjoyment of this work is in it's almost like looking at the rhythm of tension and crisis. So the piece, I would say, in itself it's not necessarily frightening because it's so abstracted and it's very formalistic and sort of very crafted, but there is a sort of underlying constant tension in there, and we've used music that isn't obviously the music from the film, because obviously, you know, copyright reasons we're not using anything directly from the film, but we've used music that has a slight, you know, that we feel has the same kind of drives, and I think we've even used bits of plucking strings because there's quite a lot of that in there. So I'd be really interested in hearing from you about your knowledge of how music is used in The Shining, and yeah, what insights you might offer to Kubrick's style and music and kind of rhythm as well. I'm really interested in what you would say about sort of rhythm of tension.
Yeah, it's The Shining is such an interesting product because it's sort of a culmination of a lot of at least the previous two movies are, you know, both Clockwork Orange, 2001, and Barry Lyndon are all borrowed music, all classical music from other places. And it's in The Shining that we see, you know, it's like the fourth in that group, you know. So it's, you know, 2001, Clockwork Orange, Barry Lyndon, and then The Shining is the last of those of that group, I would say. And it really does. It has he builds tension in a lot of interesting ways. One of the ways that he does it is he takes borrowed pieces and he combines them together just for sound value, just to create the curious, weirdest sounds that he can get. And of course, he chose for the film all of this 20th century atonal, very eerie sounding extended techniques on string instruments, like you said, plucking, but also, you know, scraping the strings, and a lot of glissandos, like woo, like that kind of thing. So with The Shining, and in that particular scene that you're talking about, it's just all about picking the music that sets your teeth on edge and makes you feel like something horrible is happening. Because if you, like you said, if you take it sort of out of context, it may lose a little bit of that, but you try to like bring that in with another musical cue, and also just the way that that you're feeling the rhythm of that tension and that crisis. But the thing about the acting, along with the music in the film, is that it just sort of builds. It just keeps building, and it's almost like this relentless move towards tension, and the release comes so much later. You know, like from that point, the release of tension is like an hour in the film. And so you're just on edge for that entire time. And one of the things that I tried to do with all of the scores is sort of like figure out what was happening in every moment. And The Shining is the only Kubrick film where there were probably maybe 3 or 4 minutes where I don't know what was happening. They didn't keep the best notes on it, because the music editor was putting together a lot of different things and was like, well, would you like it like this, or do you like it like this? Yeah. So there's like maybe 2 or 3, maybe 3 minutes in that whole last hour of The Shining where there's a couple of minutes where I'm like, don't know where that cue comes from, and that in itself is sort of like, oh, I mean, and the thing about that music is that it kind of rises almost out of ambient noise.
Yeah, well, that's what I think. Sometimes you don't necessarily. I mean, yeah, some of it is recognizable music. Some, there's like the borrowed stuff, but some of it just feels like it's just like it's been put on afterwards to the edit. And I mean, this is where I have questions, like, because it's so much in relation to the edit for me. The edit is utterly sort of spot on rhythmically, like, and I just think it's awesome. You know, the acting, the eyebrow raise in relation to, the music is so spot on with that I really wonder about how that. Whether the music's composed and then it's sort of put on in the right way, or whether the music is composed to the edit, or whether the music even borrowed. I mean, I don't know. I'm asking you.
well, this is the funny thing, as I'm saying, is this is the Shining is this moment in Kubrick's filmmaking where this is where it all sort of comes together. And so you have Gordon Stainforth, who's the music editor, and he's cutting things together. And Kubrick was sort of he disliked cutting things off that didn't have a sort of natural, organic ending point. And a lot of the music that he chose did not. So it was trying to figure out how you could get a cue that made sense but didn't feel like you were just cutting it off in the middle of it. And so Gordon Stainforth would have the film and the music, and he would edit them together in different ways. So maybe he would give Kubrick 3 choices or 4 choices and say, like, okay, I've edited the footage here with this music, and then I've edited it here and I've ended it a little bit differently, and then here I've done it and I've combined this. So he would give him all of these different options, and then Kubrick would choose the one that worked the best. And like I said, of course, Gordon Stainforth is not taking the most perfect notes in terms of like what's happening in every moment. Most of the time we could figure out what's going on, after the fact. But it was just all about trying to get maybe this cue plus that cue and this edit together. And I think you're absolutely right to say, like, the editing is completely spot on, because it so perfectly matches exactly sometimes what you expect and sometimes what you don't expect, which is what keeps you on stage. It's very chilling, and the music, I think the way that Gordon Stainforth and Kubrick sort of collaborating, trying to figure out what's the best, eeriest, most uncanny and uncomfortable version of it. I think at times the film was cut to a cue to make it work, and other times a cue might have been faded out so that we could be done with it when that particular rhythm was finished.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, if I try and particularly that scene I've watched again and again because we've sort of studied it meticulously. Not necessarily in terms of music, because we were more into the visuals and the action and the performance, the sound of the performance, or the sort of, and it was a strange thing of not mimicking the actors, somehow embodying the actors and taking a sort of rhythm of it, but we have also variations of gender as well, which we're playing a lot with. So we have female Shelleys, but also male Shelleys, and lots of different people that play Shelley. That's the other really exciting thing about the project, is that there's a sort of invite to participation where people can join the installation at a certain very specific point and learn the role. So we've taught this sort of role of how to be Shelley and how to sort of, and it's very sort of. It's very crass in a way, because we're sort of going, you need to open your eyes big, and you need to, because they're really sort of basic things of how to be Shelley. And of course, no one can be Shelley because she's just utterly awesome. Shelley is just Shelley. No one can actually be Shelley. But the joy of the thing is because she's almost like cartoon, because she did play Olive in Popeye, didn't she?
Yeah.
A sort of amazing cartoon face and an amazing physicality, and she does fear and wobbliness in such an amazing way that you can sort of break it down into, well, actually it's her elbows, or actually it's something to do with her jaw that's hanging, and so we play on the attempt to become something.
Yeah.
In the piece. Sorry, I'm going off track here, but I think what I'm saying is bringing. I had a thought though. It was based on what you said.
It'll come to you. It made me want to go and see it so I could be Shelley.
I'd love you to be Shelley. People really enjoy being Shelley. I think it's, that's right. It's something to do with how. So we've studied this scene, but interestingly, from what you were talking about with the music, even though I feel like every time I sort of think of the scene, I'm sort of hearing the music is the most strong thing, even though that's not the thing I've studied. I'm hearing the sort of, and then sort of like how it sort of raises into this high pitch, and just the bit before we cut out the bit where it cuts into Danny, and the sort of blood bit, we sort of leave that out of it, and then jump into the climbing up the stairs. But something you said about the decision to sort of fade the music out is just something that I realised that must be the hardest thing, because like you don't notice that at all. I have no concept of how any of these sort of scenes end musically. Yeah. Obviously that's why it works, because you're not supposed to notice it.
Right. You're not supposed to notice it.
That's one of those things that really struck me from listening to you, going, God, I'm going to have to look at it again and just notice how does he change from one? How does he cut from that scene and stop that tension building? But it never stops building. But obviously it keeps changing. So I was really fascinated. Yeah.
It moves through different pieces. Like it does almost the entirety of one thing, and then it sort of overlaps with something else that kind of takes it over to the next thing, and then sometimes it disappears.
Silence, aren't there?
What's that?
There are bits of silence as well, but very,
Yeah.
or just natural sound.
Yes, which also is sort of that moment too, like when the musical sort of underpinning goes away, and then you're just left with, like, say, the typing sound, or you know, just the sound of people walking through, or, you know, Shelley with the cart, you know, earlier in the film, and you get just the sounds of that. I think one of the things that Kubrick does really, really well is know when to shut up, you know, and just let things be. I mean, was one of the greatest things about 2001 was all the silence, you know, and
But it's never silence, is it? It's sort of, it still feels very composed.
Yes, right. It's almost like this is important. This silence is more important than just regular silence, you know, in between our two musics, and I think that's true of The Shining as well. Because I think part of it is that desolation of, we are totally alone up here, and if we're not talking, no one's talking. Or if we're hearing something, that means that something outside of us is happening, and that's what's so terrifying, is that, you know, like when he's standing there and he starts hearing music from the ballroom, like, that shouldn't be happening, you know. And so we go from silence into sound, and from sound into silence, and I think it in every choice, I think it's brilliantly done. I mean, I'm clearly a fan, but I think it's sort of brilliantly done that when he takes that music away, it's almost like, oh gosh, we're all alone again. And I think part of Shelley's reaction is that she knows there's no one to help, you know, and so she's got to find it within herself to fight, when most of the time she would just sort of let it, well, you know, it's going to be okay, and we're really working hard, and, you know, Jack's going to take care of everything. And then she suddenly realizes, it's just, I have to save my son, so I have to, like, grow a pair and, like, you know, take this baseball bat and hit my husband as he's climbing up the stairs, you know. And as soon as I hit him, a big, you know, some Penderecki starts, and the music starts again, and it's almost like it brings us out, it sort of jars us out of that silence into this, again, now we're running and we're chasing, and so it really does. I mean, it just gets the heart going, and at times when it's not there, I think it feels eerie as well.
Yeah, totally it does. Yes.
Wow, it just makes me want to watch The Shining. So I'm just stepping in now, because I think it's a good place to bring this to a close. I feel like I've learned so much in such a short space of time about your thinking, Christine, and obviously about the project, Heni. So I just want to say a massive thank you to both of you for taking part. Hopefully, maybe we'll meet one day in Nottingham soon, or maybe online again. Thanks very much. See you soon.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Heni.